Open YouTube, Google, Reddit, whatever. Talk to basically any financial advisor and you'll hear the exact same line. You need at least $1 million, maybe two, to retire. Well, I retired at 39 with nowhere close to that. Now, 10 years later, I'm doing better than fine. And I'm not some weird outlier. So I started digging. Who actually decided that $1 million wasn't enough? And why does that number keep climbing so fast that it doesn't even make sense anymore? If you're somewhere between 40 and 67 and quietly wondering whether you're screwed because you're nowhere near seven figures, stick around, because I think you'll be surprised to hear about how normal people like you are able to retire on far less. Okay, so where did $1 million even come from in the first place? Here's what's funny. It's not math. Well, not really. It's a rounded, media-friendly number built on a pile of worst-case assumptions stacked on top of each other. A market crash timed perfectly badly. Healthcare costs spiraling out of control. A retirement that somehow lasts 40 years. And this one really gets me. A lot of these models, they just quietly leave out Social Security entirely. Like it doesn't even exist. And here's the thing that should really make you stop and think. 1 in 3 retirees are living just fine on under $500,000. Half of what we're all told is the bare minimum. That's not some rare exception that you can just wave away. That's a third of retirees right now breaking a rule that nobody told them that they were allowed to break. So if a third of people are already doing this successfully, who's still out there selling the scary version? Well, let's follow the money for a second because it's not that complicated. Most financial advisors get paid a percentage of whatever they manage for you, an AUM fee, which stands for assets under management. So the bigger number that they convince you that you need, the bigger the pile that they manage, and the bigger their paycheck at the end of the year. Now, I want to be fair here. I don't think that most advisors are just like lying to you on purpose. I think most of them, they genuinely believe the numbers that are on the page. But the incentive, it's already baked into the math before you even sit down in the office chair. And scaring you just a little, well, it isn't malpractice. It just happens to be really good for business. And it's not only advisors. See, this number has a paper trail and it's a really telling one. Back in 2020, Northwestern Mutual ran their annual survey and asked Americans what they thought that they would need to retire comfortably. The number came back at $951,000. By 2026, just 6 years later, that same survey had it at $1.46 million. That's a 53% jump in just 6 years. Now, if you lived through the last 6 years, you know inflation was absolutely brutal, especially around 2022. So maybe that tracks. Except, no, it doesn't. If you add up the actual cumulative inflation over the same stretch, you get roughly 27%. So the number that the industry tells us that we need rose twice as fast as the actual cost of living did. So did retirement really get 53% more expensive? Or did the industry just get a lot better at the fear part? And honestly, that gap is nothing compared to what some of the bigger financial personalities, or gurus as I like to call them, are always saying. One of the most watched personal finance gurus out there, I'll leave them nameless, said that the average person might need $5 to $10 million to retire safely. Not 1, 10. And when someone with that kind of reach says a number like that, it doesn't just sit there. I mean, it gets clipped, it gets reposted, and within a week, you've got 100 panic-inducing, so-and-so says you need 10 million videos flooding everyone's feed. And what almost never makes it into the clip is the fine print. Early withdrawal, no pension, 0 Social Security, decades of runway, worst case everything stacked on top of worst case everything. The asterisk doesn't go viral. The scary round number does. So now you've got people making 6 figures a year, house paid off or close to it, living a completely modest and reasonable life, convinced that they're basically broke because some guru on a stage told them that they need $10 million and that was the floor, not the extreme edge. I mean, go open Yahoo Finance, MSN, any of these aggregator sites, and it's the same playbook every single time. Why $1 million isn't enough anymore? The new retirement number, it'll shock you. That's not reporting, That's built for clicks, and fear just clicks a lot better than reassurance does. It's not even a close contest. Now, stack an entire content ecosystem on top of that. Shorts, TikToks, AI slop churning out, oh, you'll never retire. Clickbait by the thousands. And the whole machine is optimized for one job, to keep you anxious enough to keep watching, not calm enough to actually sit down and make a real plan. So the number isn't rising because life truly got that much more expensive. It's rising because fear performs well. And that's really the whole story here. If you want real numbers instead of the scary headline version, go ahead and hit subscribe. This channel is basically dedicated to real people like you doing this on way less than $1 million. Okay, now let me tell you about my own numbers. When I retired at 39, 10 years ago, I had roughly $700,000, and that included my paid off house. According to all the noise out there, that should have been a disaster waiting to happen. In fact, I recently made an unbelievably horrible decision of making a Reddit post about my story. Now, half the people on Reddit think that I live in a box under a bridge and I'm eating cat food. The other half, they think that I'm some extreme case who simply got lucky with market timing. I mean, by their logic, I guess I shouldn't have saved 70% of my income, invested over a long period of time, nor paid off my house in just 11 years. Because that was all just luck, right? Instead, I should have spent it all on new cars and Uber Eats and resigned myself to the fact that I'd have to work until I'm 80 years old. Because, well, the system, it just rigged against me. But I digress. Anyway, depending on what the market did that particular week, my net worth now sits somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million. But if you're locked onto that number, you're kind of missing why I'm telling you this. Everyone's number really is different. Some people genuinely do need $5 or $10 million. Health, location, lifestyle, all that factors in. But you're probably not one of them. In fact, most people watching this have less than $1 million saved, and they're going to retire anyway. So instead of chasing a number that was never built with your life in mind, let me just tell you what ours actually looks like. 5 months a year, my wife and I, we're in Asia. Mid-range hotels or an Airbnb if we're staying for a longer stretch. We eat out most meals because in Asia, it's often cheaper to eat out than cook at home. The other 7 months, we're home here in Indiana. My wife gardens, she cooks, really good food actually. We ride bikes, we hike, we hit the gym 4 times a week. We drive out to see family, concerts, a lot of them free. In the fall, there's basketball and hockey games because people on Facebook give away tickets constantly. It still blows my mind what people just hand over if you're paying attention. We also work in this YouTube channel together, which honestly, some weeks, it's the best part. And that's our life now. It's not luxurious, no boat, no Rolex, but it's more than comfortable, and I have freedom. My time is entirely mine. I built this life on purpose, on way less than what everyone insists that you need. But I do have to be honest about something. Retiring at 39 wasn't a completely fearless leap. There definitely were nights, especially the 2 years right before I actually pulled the trigger, where I sat there with my spreadsheet and I was convinced that, well, maybe I'm the reckless one. The guy who runs out of money at 60 and spends the rest of his life regretting it. But what actually convinced me that I could make it work was stumbling across a couple traveling the world on a fraction of what I'd been told was necessary. And my first reaction wasn't inspiration. It was suspicion, like, how the heck are they actually doing this? Maybe that's what you're thinking right now. But that question is what sent me looking for more people quietly breaking the rule on purpose. And what I found wasn't luck. It was a pattern. Geo arbitrage, slow travel, a paid off house, a second or third income stream, short bursts of extreme saving, choosing experiences over stuff, over and over again. Same building blocks, different people. I found couples retiring $30,000 or $40,000 a year, sitting on just $300,000 to $700,000 total. That's not a rounding error off the $1 million rule. That's a different rule book entirely. To be clear, an 8 to 10% withdrawal rate, right, $500,000, taken rigidly for 30 straight years, that's not safe under any model. And nobody credible will tell you otherwise. But here's what almost none of the $1 million rule content accounts for. Hardly any of these people are pure portfolio withdrawal retirees. Most have a second income running alongside the savings, creating content, remote consulting, seasonal work, a spouse who still works part-time here and there. The portfolio isn't funding the whole $40,000 a year. It's just filling the gap between what the side income covers and what the lifestyle actually costs. Traditional retirement advice completely ignores all this. Leaving your 9 to 5 doesn't mean that you or your spouse never earn another dollar again in any form. Their spending flexes too. Bad market year, they don't take the same withdrawal anyway. They travel less, push back a big purchase, tighten up for a stretch, and that flexibility alone changes the whole equation. A lot of early retired folks build kind of a bridge. Income, flexibility, geography, all working together until Social Security, home equity, or some kind of inheritance eventually takes some of the weight off the portfolio itself. Let me give you 3 real examples. You might already know some of these. Rob and Allie from Grounded Life Travel retired with about $400,000. Since 2018, they've been slow traveling full time. Trains, cruises, points, cheap monthly rentals across Asia and Europe. They started documenting it on YouTube, and 8 years later, that channel's a real income stream that they never even planned for. Tyke and Tina from Tyke and Tina Adventures retired on roughly the same amount, around $400,000, living in Southeast Asia on about $3,000 a month. Genuinely one of the clearest proof points out there. A full, real life on $3,000 a month. A year later, their accounts had actually grown to around $500,000. Not from new contributions, just market growth. And I know their withdrawal rate looks aggressive on paper, sure, but they're expecting a solid chunk of Social Security down the line. And then there's Dwayne, who runs Retire Early 500K. 20 years in the music industry, retired at 59 with just over $500,000. He lives a modest middle-class life out in California's high desert, tracks his portfolio publicly every month, and fills his time with content. Extremely comfortable, not living out of his car eating rice and beans. Different numbers, different backgrounds, same outcome. Retired early, under $1 million, living pretty good lives. Now, you want to know what actually determines your number? For most people, it comes down to 2 things: housing and healthcare. A paid off house plus a few months a year somewhere like Southeast Asia or Mexico is one retirement. A mortgage payment plus full US healthcare premiums is a completely different one. That gap alone can shrink or double what you need by nearly 50% or more. So when someone tells you $1 million, they're not really answering your question. They're answering it for someone with a mortgage, full price healthcare, and a zip code that they never really chose to reconsider. Change those 2 things, and for a lot of you, retirement stops being, well, someday maybe, and starts being, well, actually pretty soon. Now, I don't want to swap one fear for another here, so let me be straight. For some people, $1 million or more really is the right number. Health issues, expensive location, lifestyle that isn't negotiable, that's their reality, but it doesn't have to be your reality. And here's the stat that kind of blows this whole thing up. The median American has somewhere between $87,000 and $200,000 saved for retirement. Not $1 million, not even half of one. And yet, millions of people retire anyway, every single year, on exactly that. So really, there's 2 roads. One built on actual math, actual flexibility, actual trade-offs, and one built on a single worst-case scenario sold to everybody as if it's the only story that exists. And look, both roads are real, but only one of them has a marketing budget behind it. Here's what this whole thing actually led me to. Some people, again, they really do need $1 million or more. High healthcare costs, an expensive location, and no interest in changing either of those. If that's you, fine, that really is your number. But again, that's not most people. Most people retire on way less and do just fine. Not through luck, not through some brutal sacrifice, but through a handful of deliberate choices that the $1 million rule never bothers accounting for. And the system handing out the number doesn't really care or separate the 2 groups. It just hands everyone the same scariest version because, well, scared people don't retire. They keep saving, they keep paying fees, they keep booking another appointment. It's not that the number's fake, it's just likely not your number. And once you see that, the question changes. Not how much do I need? It's more like, need it for what exactly? Whose life is this number even describing? Because odds are it's not describing yours. If you made it this far, you're probably thinking, okay, nice theory, but does it actually survive 10 real years, market crashes and all? Fair. And I already made that video, walking through the actual decade since I retired. The good years, the scary ones like COVID, everything I got wrong along the way. If this video was about who's selling you the fear, that one's about what happens once you stop buying it. Links down below. And remember, retirement isn't just a math problem. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you in the next one.